So good evening, everyone. My name is John Goldberg. I'm assigned to project management at Public Works, working on the Easter bond program. I'll be the hearing officer for tonight. My job as hearing officer is to record kind of the pertinent facts as best I can, forward them to the director with a recommendation, and then it will be up to the director to make a decision about how to proceed. So what I like to do is get the spelling of everyone's name. I try to do it and get it correctly. So I would ask if you speak that you spell your name so I can write it down correctly. And then what I do is try and do just a summary of a few of the facts. It's not a complete transcript. If you need that, it'll be available on YouTube or through other means. The way the hearing will go is we'll start with the department representative. We'll go with the applicant, and then there'll be an opportunity for the appellant to speak, and then public comment. So with that, I'd like to, the first item on the agenda, which is just general public comment, where members of the public may address the hearing officer on matters that are within the department's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak in general public comment? Therese, I think there's one.
Mr. Goldberg, we have Josh.
Okay. Mr. Clip?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
I just want to note that as we go through this hearing, something to keep in mind that our 2014 urban forest plan noted that San Francisco has the smallest urban tree canopy of any major city in the United States. And that plan from 2014 called for the addition of 50,000 additional street trees by 2034. Since then, San Francisco has actually lost nearly 1,300 more street trees, and that does not include, I think, around the 600 trees that fell during the recent and historic winter storms. Earlier this year, I drafted a community-based resolution that called for a moratorium on the removal of any additional trees, except if those trees are hazardous, unless and until the city starts to actually implement the plans that it spent millions of dollars creating. This includes our city's 2021 Climate Action Plan, which is a plan that was created in response to the city's declaration that we are in a climate emergency. And this plan specifically called for the city to create a policy to preserve mature trees by 2023. My community-based resolution calling for this tree removal moratorium was signed by organizations across the city, including the local chapter of the Sierra Club, the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, the Telegraph Hill Dwellers, Mission Verde, D-Forward, the San Francisco Land Use Coalition, San Franciscans for Urban Nature, the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Coalition, Friends of Esprit Park, the Alliance for Better District 6, the Laudato Si Circle of St. Ignatius Church, and more. By its own measures and standards, San Francisco is failing to do what must be done to preserve and grow its urban canopy for the future climate resilience and environmental justice of our city. And so I would respectfully submit in general comment as we go through this hearing tonight that not a single additional tree should be approved for removal unless and until the city does what it said and must do. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. Any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Move on to item 3 on the agenda. Hearing order 208099 to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 88 Saturn Street. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. Would the staff representative like to speak?
Good evening, I'm Sarah Stacy. I'm the Bureau of Urban Forestry staff representative. Everyone can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you all for your attendance at tonight's hearing. Again, my name is Sarah Stacy. I'm an urban forestry inspector with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. And tonight's hearing, we have 5 cases. To just kind of piggyback on what the speaker just said, our staff, our urban forestry staff, we do try to make very sound decisions when we are assessing and evaluating whether to approve a tree for removal. There are 2 things I point to that uphold and kind of support our decision making. One is the Urban Forestry Ordinance, Article 16 of the San Francisco Public Works Code, and that ordinance helps us establish our authority over the urban forest. And for a jurisdiction that includes all the street trees in the public right of way and also significant trees and landmark trees. We do have a case tonight that includes significant trees, which are on private property. But this article, we try to uphold and protect healthy, mature trees and only approve for removal trees that are hazardous or dead or dying. And I will also add to that trees that can be replaced easily in kind. So if they're small stature trees, less than 4-inch diameter, that can be replaced very easily in kind. In a lot of those cases, we will approve it as well. And then the second thing that also supports our decision-making is part of the Public Works Strategic Plan, this goal, which is to ensure a safe and clean public right-of-way. And that's important so that we maintain and conserve our green infrastructure, as we all certainly recognize that trees provide several valuable environmental, societal, climatic, all kinds of different benefits that improve the living conditions of our city and make it a great place to live. I certainly recognize and will acknowledge that San Francisco, we do have a very small urban forest compared to other cities. Part of that reason is because of the just kind of the natural conditions that San Francisco came from. It wasn't heavily forested. And the planners that designed San Francisco didn't necessarily, they weren't necessarily thinking about trees when they designed the city. And so we definitely have our challenges with infrastructure and trying to find places and room for trees in the public right of way. So it's always a challenge. So with that being said, I wanted to acknowledge the speaker's comments and appreciate that. I'm not sure if Public Works has responded to that moratorium. I'm uncertain. I will also recommend that that be brought up to the Urban Forestry Council if it has not already been. This is order number 208099 to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 88 Saturn Street. Our staff, we approved this removal and the public protested. This is the tree. It is a purple leaf plum, a small flowering tree in front of 88 Saturn. We posted this tree for a 15-day posting period, which means we believed it was hazardous and that it needed to be removed. It's a small stature tree. It's less than 25 feet tall. It's in poor condition, mostly because of decay and some dieback. There you can see it does have some foliage, but it's not very full or dense canopy. Dieback was observed in the canopy, decreased vigor, and a lean. So we posted this for 15 days and also noticed some conchs, some fungal conchs, types of fungus growing on the trunk, which is a sign of decay. This tree failed during the posting period. So it no longer exists. It fell over and the tree crews responded to the failure, and we do have that service request work order. This is just 2 photos of that decay in the main trunk of the tree, and you can see the bark kind of sloughing off. And that's shows kind of why we posted it as a hazardous tree, a tree that needed to be removed. This shows the site after the tree has been removed. You can see the small tree basin there on the left, the lower left of the public right of way. It is a narrow sidewalk. And I think we will allow replacement here, though the sidewalk is very narrow. We did receive a public protest, and I believe that was due to a lack of clarity about the replacement plan. The notes say that we will replace this here, and it will be a strawberry tree. We removed the tree on May 12th. I have no other comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Stacy. Kind of a moot point about whether we should recommend removal since it's been done, but we'll still open it up to appellants if they want to speak at all and include those in the comments, along with Ms. Stacy's comment that the tree will be replaced. Who's going to replace the tree? Is the city going to do that, or is the property owner? Do we know?
This is Sarah Stacy, Urban Forestry. I do not know if we already have a request from the property owner or if Public Works will replace the tree here. We sometimes lean into the property owner if they want to seek replacement, and we add them to a waiting list. If Friends of the Urban Forest is working in this area, sometimes they'll plant the replacement tree for this location. I believe it would be primarily putting them on the waiting list.
Okay.
Putting that property owner's request on the waiting list.
Okay, very good. All right, so I see one hand up. Cerise, who's got their hand up? Oh, Josh.
Yes, that's the hand of a member of the public.
Yes,
Do you want me to go ahead and?
please, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Clip.
Yeah, just a couple of things about this. I do want to note that yes, Ms. Stacy's is 100% correct that San Francisco, in its natural state, was not heavily forested. It also didn't have nearly 1 million people in its natural state. And I think that the reason our city's urban forest plan and our climate action plan call for so many more trees is because we now have the scientific knowledge and understanding that our green infrastructure is as critical to our resilience as our gray infrastructure. Regarding the moratorium, yes, it has been presented to the Urban Forestry Council. Apparently it is on their agenda for next Tuesday, but given that they are down several members, they've been pretty unable to field a quorum lately, so it's hard to know what'll happen with that. But more importantly, regarding replacement, it's something that, you know, it comes up, you know, because that's effectively what Article 16 requires. A couple things I want to say about that just as a practical matter, in the last fiscal year, the city allocated exactly $0 for planting and replacing trees in San Francisco. And so even though there are Article 16 addresses replacement, basically all that Public Works has been able to do, given how strapped for cash it is to put trees in the ground, is create this large, long running list of trees that it's now indebted to the city to replace. I would also note that regarding other entities such as Friends of the Urban Forest, I'll just give an example. On 17th Street between Bryant and Potrero, they planted around, Friends of the Urban Forest planted around 10 new trees on 17th Street between Bryant and Potrero. And as of last week, 7 of those had been cut in half, torn off, vandalized, and are dead. So it's one thing to say replacement. It's another thing, really, what the reality of that looks like around our city. So obviously here, you know, as we pointed out, it's a moot point, tree's gone. But, you know, let's keep that in mind as we talk, you know, and when we think about replacement as sort of an adequate remedy for tree removal. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clip. Any other speakers? All right, seeing none, we'll close this item, move on to the next item on the agenda. Hearing order 208-100, to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 521 Parnassus Avenue. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested.
This is Sarah Stacy with Urban Forestry. Again, this is to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 521 Parnassus Avenue. Our staff, we approved the removal and we received public protests. This is the subject tree. It's a flowering dogwood. It's not a very common species in the city. It's a small ornamental tree. We received a removal permit to remove this tree, permit number 792747. This, as you can see in the photo, it's a small tree, not yet established. It's been recently planted. It was planted in last year in 2022. It really has no deficiencies other than it being a young, tree that's still being established. We approved it, I would say, because of the construction requirements and the location for a new fire hydrant and accessible loading zone. And then secondly, because this tree is so young and small and not established, and the fact that it can be replaced easily in kind, that's our reason for approving the removal of this small tree. It's considered kind of straightforward to be consistent with other cases. We approved the removal of this tree and we received public protest. That ends my comments.
Very good, thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? See one hand up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sean Mazzio. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Mr. Mazzio.
Thank you. I work for UCSF as a project manager for the projects that has requested this tree removal. I just want to add that UCSF is committed to greening Parnassus Heights. We've requested that the dogwood tree be removed to allow for the construction and improvement of an accessible drop-off zone in the area between the crosswalk. The dogwood was surveyed due to its location just on the side of the building. UCSF is looking to demolish to build a new research facility and home for our School of Nursing. The tree is also in poor health and it's a small species. And as you pointed out, it had been recently planted and we are providing a replacement. Thank you.
Great, Mr. Mazzio, are you able to speak to the replacement and the size of the replacement?
We had submitted a new streetscape plan as part of a separate permit application we had already put in.
Okay, all right. Very good. Any other speakers from the applicants? If not, we'll move on to the protests. Josh, I see your hand up.
Yeah, a couple of things, since it is so young and as Sarah says, as Miss Stacy says, healthy and non-established, I would be curious to know if there is a way to actually take this tree out and put it somewhere else rather than just trash it. The other thing I would point out is this is now, I think, the third or the fourth tree removal permit that's been submitted by UCSF for this project writ large. And I really don't understand. There's not, okay, how do I put this? I was involved in the largest of the permits, which was the proposed removal of 28 trees, largely along Parnassus. And in that instance, it was, basically the permit was initially approved for some promise of planting maybe 56, maybe 60 trees in and around that neighborhood along those streets. And at the end of that process, through an appeals process, UCSF actually was required to pay almost, well, $250,000 to the city for the value of the trees it was taking out, in addition to spending, I believe, another $100 and some thousand for tree planting in and around the neighborhood. So it just seems patently unfair that the public has to continue to come up against these when we're talking about one holistic integrated project by UCSF. They've got the resources to figure this out, and public should not have to keep coming back here trying to stop all of this tree removal for its construction project that failed to consider these existing trees. And I'm not going to say that this is one of those, because as a certified access specialist, I don't know the answer to whether or not this is the only place for the accessible loading zone that needs to be installed here. So I'm not saying that that's not important. That is literally what I do every day, in addition to showing up at hearings like this. But in any event, I'd like to see if there's a way that the tree could be put somewhere else. And I would also ask that the city start pushing back on these repeated requests for tree removal permits that just seem to sort of piecemeal, just keep rolling in through the course of this project with UCSF. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clip. Mr. Nolte has his hand up.
Good evening. I have the same issue as Josh has, that this is like the third or fourth tree to be removed for the same project that they're doing on Parnassus, since it's all one large project for the whole block, several blocks, and this should have been included in the streetscape that was submitted. And then I just heard the person from UCSF say that it submitted a prior streetscape to the city. So therefore, it should have been part of that design that was sent in already, instead of having losing a tree that could be, since it's new, be replanted somewhere else, and also it's taken away from the greenery of Parnassus. And also, lastly, when I was up there when we were in the drought, they had a nice big sign saying that they weren't going to water the lawns and so forth. So again, I question what is in that streetscaping plan of theirs, because they are they're losing lawns that they had in front of the Moffitt Hospital and whatever else they're planning to do. So I'm curious about how to me, it's not a greening thing when you're taking out all the green. So don't call it a green plan when it's not green anymore. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Nolte. Are there other speakers?
Yes, there's Mr. Michael Nolte. Go ahead, you should be able to speak.
Yes, my name is Michael Nolte. I had to walk the length of Parnassus when the tree removals that Josh had mentioned were first in front of the Board of Appeals. And I took pictures of all the trees. And, if we're going to be coming back over and over again because a project manager wants to remove more trees for whatever reason, it's not fair, one, to the public, and two, to a Board of Appeals hearing where we, as a community, and trying to meet with the project as a whole, trying to mitigate the future of the project. And if there are going to be pieces of one saying one thing and then more pieces coming along, we're not seeing the whole picture as far as the community. And then I also have a problem with what the project manager said, that the tree is in poor health, whereas the city says, and I reiterate, it says here, condition is good and it's a new tree. So then I question the ability of the project manager to know the condition of a tree. So if he's going to say the tree is not in good health, then is he really understanding what a good healthy tree looks like? So those were his words today at the hearing. So I would just I agree with possibly replanting the tree in another location at the expense of the hospital. And also, I mean, if they're adding more trees to be removed, then amending the agreement that was made with the city to do the same thing, add to the pot of trees that they were going to do in the mitigation. Because it seems to me that they're still not done with their understanding of which trees they would like to remove from their development. And it's not fair to the community to have to deal with pieces of
30 seconds.
permits coming ongoing to to these hearings. So I'd like to see further mitigation happen with just this permit, because that's the only one that's in front of us. But yeah, I'm dismayed at what's being said and done here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers? Cerise, I don't see any.
No, I don't see any other hands at this time.
Okay, then we'll close this matter and move on to the next item. Hearing order 208-101 to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 579 Market Street. Staff has approved the removals. The public has protested. Ms. Stacy?
Hi, this is Sarah Stacy with Urban Forestry. Again, this is to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 579 Market Street. Our staff, we approved the removals and we received public protests. This is a site plan that shows the 2 removals. The subject trees are labeled tree 4 and tree 3. They're shown on the right. This is part of construction capital improvement work for the BART along Market Street, and they did already apply and were approved to remove tree 1 and tree 2, and those trees have been removed. And that was for basically like a large access door so that equipment can be basically be dropped down into the BART system through that point. So now they've applied because of construction. They thought they could work around tree 4 and tree 3, but they've determined after excavation that they can no longer work around those trees and that they will need to be removed. So they applied to remove, again, tree 3 and 4, the 2 trees shown on the right. These are the 2 trees you can see here in front of the CVS pharmacy. They're London plane trees. That's the species planted along Market Street. Our staff would generally say these trees are in fair condition. They do provide canopy benefit through the summer, and then towards the late end of the summer, they can look a little less than ideal just because of they get a powdery mildew and a fungal disease called anthracnose, but mostly it's cosmetic, and the trees can look a little bit thin or not very dense and full. The deficiencies pointed out here were poor live crown ratio. That means that the crown volume to the ratio of the tree's height is low. Ideally, we would look for something almost 50%. When it gets to be less than 30%, we would consider that very low. So most of the tree's canopy is at the very kind of the end or the top part of the tree. We said these 2 trees were showing signs of decline. So again, kind of that thinning of the leaves and some dieback in the crown of the tree. And then also they have some poor structure. I think more kind of branching structure, just kind of kind of some like whimsical dog-like branches and branches that may have some like heavy in weight. Here, poor structure would be much easier mitigated with pruning than like a ficus tree. Root pruning in lieu of removing these trees, it would destabilize the two trees, so we don't believe that's a mitigation option. And BART needs to excavate again to access an equipment hatch so that they can lower some power equipment into the BART station. So that's why they need to create that access point there for that equipment. And they've determined those two trees need to be removed. These are just some more photos of those trees. You can see the tree on the left is thin, somewhat thinning. These trees are from late in the fall, showing the species in around the time of November. This is tree 2. Again, these are medium-sized trees. Same kind of deficiencies here. The other additional kind of deficiency we pointed out was poor taper, meaning the root flare of the tree isn't very good. It just kind of looks like a telephone pole, and that can be a point of failure for the tree when it doesn't have that strong root flare established from the point of the ground. Additional photos of the trees. Here you can see on the left, again, kind of that poor taper in the tree had started to be girdled by the tree guard. To be consistent kind of with some other construction projects where it's been determined that the two trees cannot be worked around, that is the primary reason that we've approved these two trees. They can be replaced. Here along Market Street, the trees will be planted in kind of like a vault-like structure. They would likely be the same species here, the London plane tree. Another option could be the Chinese elm, which is further down along Market Street, that would have been newly planted. Generally, in those vault-like boxes, the trees don't have as long of a life as your tree that has more soil volume. I just wanted to point that out, that they would be planted in kind of like a vault-like structure, and sometimes those can have limitations, but they are planned for replacement. That ends my comments.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant prepared to speak on this? I see Mr. Robertson has his hand up.
Yes, that's correct. This is Jason Robertson with C3M Clark Cupertino, working for the BART Traction Power Substation project. The general description of the project is accurate. This site is being worked on to install new traction power equipment in a new substation, which will provide power to BART to run trains through the Transbay Tube and through the Market Street corridor. The sidewalk work itself involves the installation of a removable access hatch, a removable panel that BART will need access to in the future in order to replace or maintain that equipment. So it was intended to, we were intending to work around these trees to the best of our ability, but the options for rigging equipment on Market Street have proven that we will not be able to work around them. So that's all we have. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Robertson, who again do you represent or work for?
It's C3M Clark Cupertino, and we're the authorized agent for BART.
I'm sorry, slower, Stevens Clark something?
The name is C3M.
Oh,
Clark.
C3M, okay,
Yes.
okay. Got it. And then
On
can
behalf
you
of BART.
speak to to the trees, the replacement trees at all as far as size or things?
I cannot. I know that we have started corresponding with the urban forestry department on the replacement of the trees for the 2 trees that were removed last year. I believe they were looking for a Columbia hybrid plane tree, but that hadn't been finalized yet. So
Okay.
we can continue that correspondence.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other speakers for the applicant? Seeing none, would anyone like to speak regarding the protest? I see a hand up, Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so as Miss Stacy mentioned, Bart was here earlier and already got a permit to remove trees 1 and 2. Also, just a couple of years ago, Bart asked to remove around 50 trees on Market Street for its entrance canopy project. At the end of the day, they figured out that they actually only had to remove around 12. For some additional context, the city also plans to remove trees up and down Market Street as part of its phased Better Market Streets plan. And by the way, while San Francisco has a 13.7% tree canopy, which again is the smallest of any major city in the United States, our Market Street corridor, the pride of San Francisco, boasts a pathetic 4% tree canopy. 4%. I'd also like to ask who's going to ensure that these trees even reach establishment, because it's not going to be BART, it's going to be the city, and our in lieu fees don't cover what it actually costs to make that happen. They don't actually cover the cost of planting and watering a tree for 3 years. And finally, our climate action plan calls for not only a policy of preservation by 2023, which started 5.5 months ago, but it also called for a policy of basal replacement. Basically, put back in as much as you take out. It's 2023. We have no policy for preservation as called for by the climate action plan. We have no policy of replacement as called for by the climate action plan. We're 1,300 trees fewer on our streets than we had in 2017. We have $0 set aside in the budget for planting and replacement. And BART is here for the 3rd time in as many years seeking to remove all these trees along Market Street. Again, a street with a 4% canopy. And then we're going to put these trees in a vault, which means that these trees will eventually wither and die for lack of soil. And my point is this: we have got to do better than what is proposed in the current permit. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clip. I see Mr. Nolte, Mr. John Nolte, you have your hand up?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sure, thank you. My issues are that, well, BART has been, was the issue that destroyed Market Street in the 1950s, and now it's coming back to do the same thing, at least with the trees that was planted after the 1950s, after BART, finished dealing with the putting in the tube and everything. So now we have 2 more trees that they want to take out. And also, since this tree now is currently where it's at, because I assume the replacement tree's got to be somewhere immediate near to where current trees are. And I would be questionable, besides, the small vault that they're going to put the tree in, the 2 replacement trees. Also, the problem right now, we have these bicycles, and people are going to hit if these new trees are replanted in an immediate area. You've got these bicycles stationed right there, and so people would just knock over the tree. So there's no guarantee. It's got to be a fairly large replacement tree, because of the location and the location to these bicycles station, because otherwise the tree is not going to survive the impact on a busy street as markets will be once people start coming back to San Francisco and we have our conventions and so forth. So the mayor is pushing to bring back Market, and if this is sort of reverse all of her plan, if you're starting to take out the amenities on Market Street, including the trees. So I think some thoughts should be thought about this, and this is, again, the third time Bart and the other two plans are taking out more trees on Market Street, and the community gets a little concerned about having to come back to more meetings on the same issues for the similar trees on Market Street. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. That Bowler? You're muted. Teresa, you able to unmute?
Mr. Goldberg, I've asked them to unmute a couple of times and maybe they're having difficulties.
Okay, so
I
let's
don't-
move on to Mr. Michael Nolte, and then we'll see if we can.
There,
Oh,
got it.
go ahead.
I didn't see that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have two comments I'd like to make. One is a question, I guess. How BART is going to manage around all the bicycles since it can't manage where that tree is? Or maybe both of them, I'm not clear on the other. And I also just want to comment that, you know, we can get to the moon, we can do a lot of very fancy things. I don't know why they can't design their entrance or whatever it is in some other way and leave that tree, because that tree is not going to be readily replaced in any sense of the word.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Is there anything else or? Okay, let's move on to Mr. Michael Nolte. Mr. Nolte?
Good evening. This is Michael Nolte, N-U-L-T-Y.
Thank you, sir.
It seems to me that San Francisco has always had great plans, and especially for its main corridor, which more or less people from San Francisco would consider Market Street to be one of its main corridors, especially its main transit corridor, because many of the Muni lines and other kinds of bus lines go down Market Street. So that means that there's a heavy presence of pedestrian traffic, but it also means that because of its it's a wide street, and then we have our civic leaders deciding to put things like the bicycle racks. We've had the scooters, and then hence comes the skateboards, and then comes all the other things that pedestrians preferably don't like to see on the sidewalks, because we have a wide also Market Street where these bicycles should be. But anyway, the point is, you're putting in all these things, infrastructure that have been and probably will be there, that are hazards not only to the pedestrians, but hazardous to the trees. Anything to beautify the neighborhood, so that more when people do go down the street, that they feel more comfortable. And if you ever listen to how the tourist industry tries to describe San Francisco, they point out that it's one of the wonders of the world, and that we want to keep it that way. And if we're constantly taking out the trees, how can we keep that claim when there's more and more of this happening? So there's kind of like too many forces going on just on our main street of San Francisco. I understand what BART needs to do, but I also more concerned about, would like to know the overall plan of replanting the trees. If we're doing again, another piecemeal thing of, are these trees going to match with the other surrounding trees that will have to be replaced? So I hope these things can be followed up in an appropriate manner, and not have to see a bunch of well, it's happened in the other developments or other areas of the city where the trees don't match at all, and it's disheartening to see. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Nolte. Other speakers? All right, seeing none, we'll close this item. Move on to the following item. Order number 208102, to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement adjacent to 490 Brandon Street. I guess the trees might actually be on the 4th Street side. Subject trees are on the 4th Street frontage of the property. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested.
This is
Stacy?
Stacy with Urban Forestry. Again, this is to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement. The trees are located on 4th Street, adjacent to the property of 490 Brandon Street. We approved the removal of the trees and we received public protests. Again, these trees are located on 4th Street. They're in our database as 599 4th Street. This is site number 1. It's an Australian willow tree, a fairly common street tree in San Francisco. They generally do look very healthy and are in good condition. They can have some structural issues where their main stems are, but they don't have a lot of failures compared to the ficus tree. We received a removal permit for these 3 trees. It is part of a development project, new construction. These are the only street trees, these 3 adjacent to the property. And our staff, we did approve them for removal because of their poor condition, fair to poor condition, and we think they should be replaced. Again, this is site number 1. Our deficiencies we pointed out were poor structure, areas where the tree had previously failed, and the dieback in the crown that you can see there in the photo in the center part of the tree. And you can see towards the end of the stems dieback as well. So just kind of a reduced vigor. This site is planned to be replaced, as well as new trees required for the development. This is just another picture of that site number 1. And if you look in the center of the image towards the top, you can see that dieback that we identified. I would say approximately, possibly a quarter of the tree is dead. This is site number 2, the second tree, same species, approximately same height, medium size. Again, approved because of the dieback in the crown and just kind of a reduced vigor. Also, you can see poor structure was identified. It's not necessarily a very strong reason for removal. I would say more the dieback and condition of the tree is. But you can see here the tree doesn't have like a nice strong central leader. Instead, it has kind of several points of attachment, all originating kind of from one area. That can be considered a weakness. This site will be replaced as part of the development project. And this is just another image of that tree. You can see here just kind of the thinning of the crown, and the growth is not very vigorous or dense. And this is the most obvious removal of the 3. This is the 3rd site. It's a medium-sized tree. This is more than 50% dead or has more than 50% dieback. And our staff would definitely see this as a very strong removal candidate. Anything over, then I would say 30 to 40% dieback is a good removal candidate, because you're having to basically that tree doesn't have a good amount of foliage to support itself for photosynthesis. So a lot of dieback, previous failures, it's in decline. It's kind of just an obvious removal, and this site will be replaced as well. And these are just additional photos of that site. This is the site plan. This project plans to plant 14 trees in total. So the 3 removed trees will be replaced as well as new trees required for this development project. That will include on all 3 frontages, Freelawn Street, 4th Street, and as well as Brannan. And you'll see kind of they're maximizing their planting space, filling all of the right of way with as many trees as possible, taking into account infrastructure and as well as clearance requirements as you approach the intersection in requirements for clearance from streetlights and other infrastructure. So to be consistent with other cases, based on the condition of the trees, them being in decline, our staff, we approve the removal. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is the applicant prepared to speak? I see one hand up.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Can you help me with your last name, please?
Yes, Sabrina.
Great, thank you.
Yes, so good evening. Sabrina Shaghi here with Ruben, Junius, and Rose on behalf of the project sponsor, Trammell Crow. The proposed tree removal at 490 Brannan is necessary in order to complete the construction and offsite improvements for the project, which is a Central Soma key site that was approved by the Planning Commission in September 2021. The project includes construction of a 12-story mixed-use office building with PDR and arts activities uses, childcare, retail, all above a single below-grade parking garage. A 30-foot wide mid-block alley along the east side of the lot would also provide privately owned public open space. The project requires the removal of all 3 of the existing trees, which will be replaced with 14 new street trees consistent with the Better Streets Plan. That's 4 times more streets in the public realm than exists today. All this has been reviewed by the SDOT team prior to Planning Commission approval. The 3 existing trees cannot be left in place because this is a major construction project with significant excavation, and the trees will conflict with the shoring and excavation required for the project. In addition, the 3 trees are not good candidates for relocation, as staff said, because the tree roots were disturbed during the Central Subway construction, and all have significant deficiencies or are in poor health. So they're expected to decline during or after construction, regardless of management. In closing, the removal of the 3 existing trees is necessary for construction of this important city project and will be replaced with 4 times the number of street trees, all of which are consistent with city tree guidelines. Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Great. No, thank you very much. Any other speakers on behalf of the applicant? Okay, seeing none, would anyone like to speak regarding the protest? Go ahead, Ms. Bowler.
Yeah, I'm not used to coming to these hearings, and so I want to comment that I find the use of the word replace close to offensive because you can't replace a tree. You can put another tree where it was, but it'd be like saying to say you're replacing the tree would be like saying if you, I don't want to use a human analogy, so if you had a pet dog that died, you aren't replacing it if you get another dog, you're getting another dog. And I'm not blaming anybody for using that word, but I think that we need to look at it and find another way to speak because we are realizing the great importance of every leaf we've got. And so also separately, I would like to ask why a severe pruning of any of these trees would not make them viable. Like the tree that has growth on one side and not on the other. If you were to cut it back, it would not grow, would not replace itself. I'm just asking, so thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bowler. Mr. Clip, you have your hand up?
Thanks.
Go ahead,
Can-
sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, through 311, which is the city's app to interface with citizens regarding various city-related issues. I have personally reported dead trees all over San Francisco, trying to get the city to remove and replace those trees. Ideally, to get them planted and established before we reach that tipping point identified in the city's 2021 climate action plan. And it's super discouraging to see that my years-old requests for replacements sit unattended in my 311 queue, but development and infrastructure apparently gets priority and just jumps to the top of the removal list. It makes me wonder what our removal priorities are based on, if that's need or just who's got the money to pay for it. I'm going to go back to our 2021 climate action plan, and I'm going to just get more specific here that it's on page 120, supporting action HE.5-4, which calls for tree preservation and basal replacement. Apparently our city is ignoring this so far because it was asked, the climate action plan says to do this by 2023. I would respectfully suggest if we don't start doing it sometime, it's just not going to get done. So to the extent that we're talking about replacement, I would ask that that replacement comply with the 2021 climate action plan. And to be clear, the addition of all those new trees, that's not a gift to the city, and it's not related to this removal. That's a requirement of new construction. These removals are above and beyond the number required by the law for the new construction. And so the replacement of these trees, which is in addition to what the city is, what the developer is required to plant, should comply minimally with the climate action plan. And certainly a project of this size has got the funding to do that. So I would respectfully request that that be done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Clip. Mr. Michael Nolte?
Yes, Michael Nolte. I'm the executive director of Alliance for a Better District 6. This falls into the boundaries of District 6. That's why I'm giving my title. You know, again, the District 6 has always been the go-to district to put in new everything because it had a lot of soft sites. And so, you know, once a developer finds the money, and then, you know, we start to put in the project, and then, you know, unfortunately, we get a lot of new neighbors because of what's happened in District 6. That's why we lost. We had the largest district, and so we had to cut a whole neighborhood out of District 6 because we had too many people during the redistricting process. So, and why is that? Because the developers have come along and developed and put more people into District 6. So it's not uncommon for people that live in District 6 to understand that projects have certain requirements, which include you know, putting in new sewers, how they're going to deal with the new students that are going to be coming into the neighborhood, the families, the pedestrians, and of course, the beautification of the neighborhood. It's their responsibility, not just to put up a bunch of concrete and assume that that's all they need to do. So, you know, sometimes when we come to these hearings, all we're hearing is, oh, we're going to be putting in some more trees. Well, what's the actual plan for open space? I mean, there's more to it. It's not just putting in a bunch of street trees. It's part of the planning process. And we end up getting these hearings after it's already gone through to the planning department. And and it's unfortunate we're hearing from the representative who's an attorney firm and not the actual somebody that's going to be the planting the trees, or an actual staff person that will be putting in the development. So it all sounds good because the person's an attorney, but the reality is District 6 has been dumped on with a bunch of developers over the years, and we're not getting our money's worth. Bottom line, we're not getting our money's worth. We need more trees, especially when you're adding more people into the neighborhood.
10 seconds.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Nolte, let me ask, the organization, are you speaking for yourself or are you speaking on behalf of the organization?
I am the executive director. I speak on behalf of the organization.
Okay, and the executive director, can you tell me the organization again?
Alliance, Alliance,
Uh,
Alliance for a Better District 6. And we've been reviewing projects for over 20 years.
Great, thank you, Mr. Nolte. I just want to make sure I included that. All right, I see Mr. John Nolte, your hands are up. Your hand is up. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
All right, thank you. Couple things, as been stated as actually on the picture that we see right in front of us here. You see there are at least three sides to this property that are good, that has sidewalk, and so therefore that sidewalk every 20 feet or so has to have a tree by city law. So anything else that was said, that's mute to, again, unless there's a utility conflict or whatever, or driveway or something else that's in conflict around that 20 feet. That's why we're getting what the city requires of all developers to put in every 20 feet a tree. So we're not getting anything new out of this development at all in the way of trees. And then honestly, actually, the third tree that was shown in the picture, and they're saying they want to take it out because they need the space to build the building. Well, okay, so you're going to take out the tree, but I also saw in the picture, less than 3 feet away was a light pole. So you're going to take the light pole out too? So when we start looking at these things, I question the reasoning. You're going to remove a city light pole so you can have access to the site for your development So I question, again, why are these hearings, or these not being discussed prior to during the planning department phase and other phases of the development, and instead of having to have it at the end here when they want to break ground now. This is not right. For the community has to speak out about saving the 3 trees that they want to take out. And also seeing the graffiti on the building shows that the current property owner doesn't care about the buildings or what's there right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Nolte. Are there other speakers? Seeing none, I'll close this matter and move on to the final matter. Hearing order 208103 to consider the removal of 15 significant trees on private property and the removal of 1 street tree with partial replacement adjacent to 1345 Ellis Street. Staff has partially approved the removal and the public has protested. Staff has partially denied the removals and the applicant has appealed.
This is Sarah Stacy with Urban Forestry. Again, this is to consider the removal of 15 significant trees, and those are on private property, and the removal of 1 street tree These are with partial replacement. The location is adjacent to the address of 1345 Ellis Street. We received a removal permit for this project. It's 789225. Our staff, we partially approved some of the removals. I'll go over that. And we also denied some of the removals, for which both of those we received protest or appeal. So 15 trees were applied to be removed. They are significant trees and then also one street tree. 5 significant trees were denied and we approved 10 significant trees. A significant tree is a tree located on private property, but it has to be within 10 feet of the public right-of-way, and it has to meet at least one of 3 size criteria. Those criteria are 20 feet in height, or a 15-inch canopy spread, or a diameter of the trunk measured at 12 inches. So we denied trees sites 1, 2, 3, 14, and 15, and we approved trees 4 through tree 13. Some of those sites can be replaced. Some of them cannot because of appropriate spacing between sites. And then we also approved a tree at 1355 Laguna Street. That's a street tree I'll show you, and that will be replaced. This is site number 1. These are Lombardy poplar trees. They're very kind of columnar in shape. They provide good screening here. All these trees are significant trees planted along a retaining wall that serves as like a wall edge of a parking lot, underground parking lot. The trees are in a kind of a narrow planting strip again, adjacent to that wall, in between the public right-of-way, the sidewalk, and the garage. So they are very close to that retaining wall. We approve some of these trees because of their poor location, but also because of their loss of vigor and decay, which we'll show. This is tree site number 1. We denied this tree because we found it to be in fair enough condition. And it's providing some benefits to the public right-of-way as a significant tree, and then also to that property as a private tree. We believe any kind of risk of failure can be mitigated by pruning the tree. This is just another photo of that tree. It is very common for these trees to have several upright stems, sometimes codominant stems, maybe with included bark. Here you can see this tree kind of has like 3 central stems, three leaders. I would say these photos show kind of a typical structure for this tree. It's in fair condition. It didn't have significant decay present, or neither did it have significant dieback. You can see here in proximity to that retaining wall, parking lot edge, and these trees just form kind of like a row of screening here on the private property. And then just finally another photo. This is site number 2. This site also was denied. It's a large stature tree, fair structure, fair condition, and we believe any kind of safety concern with branches falling because of any decay can be mitigated by pruning. So basically prune the tree to reduce the load or kind of the canopy weight on the distribution on those branches to reduce any risk. These are more photos of that site number 2. This is a smaller size tree compared to site number 1. This is site number 3, same species, large tree, fair structure, fair condition, similar to site 1 and site 2. We also denied this site, and again, any risk of branch failure can be reduced by pruning. We can't say it can be eliminated totally. That would require the tree to be removed. We do want to accept some risk in order to basically keep keep those benefits that the trees provide. Some additional photos. Fair structure, no included bark or codominant stems with poor attachment. Here you see in the photo on the right, a very kind of wide shaped or U-shaped main union. So that has strong branch attachment. This is site number 4. We did approve this tree for removal. We identified poor structure and also decay present with very large cavities, meaning basically areas within the trunk of the tree that are hollow and susceptible to failure. This site we identified as not being able to be replaced just because of the proximity to the adjacent trees, and it would be difficult to establish another tree there because of those existing trees basically suppressing that site, creating shade, and it would be difficult to plant another tree here. An appropriate species would have to be a consideration. And again, just the spacing is very narrow. These are additional photos of that site number 4. You can see here where the tree was pruned. Those pruning wounds have left the tree susceptible to decay entering. Where my cursor is, these pruning wounds are not sealing over as well. This species, the Lombardy poplar, is very susceptible to decay. It's a weak compartmentalizer, meaning that it doesn't seal off those wounds quickly or easily. It's very slow to respond. So decay can grow rapidly in these trees up and down kind of these columns and be susceptible to failure. This is site number 5. It also was approved for removal. It's a large stature tree. It has poor structure, and we also observed decay in large cavities. We identified this site to be replaced with a tree. These are some additional photos. You'll see here, again, pockets of decay from old pruning wounds where the tree hasn't sealed over those areas. And again, those areas just become columns of decay growing kind of up and down the tree's trunk. And here in this photo, you'll see towards the bottom of the trunk, a small cavity of decay, which can be hazardous, especially observed down here near the root system, can cause basically the whole tree to fail, especially concerning that this tree doesn't have a lot of root system adjacent to the retaining wall garage side to support itself. This is site number 6. We also approved this site for removal. This will not be replaced again due to the proximity to some of the adjacent trees and just to appropriately space kind of a new pattern should these be removed. We would like to see greater spacing. Here you can see those areas of decay and cavities. Here, again, often these areas are formed after where the tree has been pruned. And again, it's kind of just typical for this species to be susceptible to decay. We just kind of know that it's a kind of a given. There's not really anything you can do necessarily to prevent it. Prune it less. But if they're dead, broken, diseased branches, you would want to have removed those. And for some structural reasons, it's hard to say why the property owner removed this branch. It could have failed at one point. But this is an area where that column of decay is just continuing up and through the trunk of the tree, which makes it susceptible to failing. This is site number 7. This site was also approved It will be replaced given the appropriate spacing between kind of a new replacement plan. We identified again, also here, similar to the other subject trees, decay and large cavities. And you can see here those areas of decay, pockets of decay in the column of the tree. And also at the base of the tree where the roots are at. This is site number 8. This site we approved. It's a large tree, very similar and comparable to the previous subject trees. This site will not be replaced again, so that we can achieve better spacing here along that row. Here you can see previous failures where the trees had large sections of the tree fail and areas of decay in the root base of the tree that are present in the column of the tree. Here you can see a large cavity forming in that main central column of the tree, and then another pocket of decay. So we likely, this column of the tree would be very hollow. This is site number 9. We also approved this tree for removal. It will be replaced. Two photos showing more decay and that those areas of decay through the column of the tree and also at the base of the tree. This is site number 10, rated as in poor condition. You can see kind of the dieback in the crown of the tree. That's a symptom of the decay present, as that tree can't bring up nutrients from the ground and water to basically feed itself. So poor condition, and also again, similar to the other trees, decay present in large cavities. This site would not be replaced because of the poor spacing of this row. Here you can see where areas of the bark has been sloughing off and areas of decay in the main center part of the tree. This is site number 11. This site was also approved for removal. This site will be replaced compared to the tree on the right. This has fair canopy, but we also found root and decay present in large cavities. Here you can see at the base of the tree a concerning cavity. This likely continues up the column of the tree to this area of decay present, which is this area. And just these trees can be susceptible to some of these limbs tearing out and failing. This is site number 12. This was approved for removal, rated as poor condition because of the decay and those areas of large cavities. This tree would not be replaced, mostly because of the location and proximity to this kind of access point, door, shed area. It's just too close to that wall. It's basically right tree, right place, kind of a violation of those principles to have a tree so close to that private property area. You'll see closer here that tree's growing right up against that structure. And it's just not sustainable over the long term. This tree will continue to grow and damage that area. And that's why it can't be replaced in that location. This is site number 13. You'll see this tree is on that back side of that structure. So same thing. We approved this tree for removal because of its poor condition, because of the cavity and decay, and it cannot be replaced because of that poor location being so close to the structure. Here you'll see it's growing right up against the private property. You could say it's starting to damage that property because of the poor location. And it will only continue to get worse. This is not going to be sustainable to keep the tree here, nor to replace a tree in that location. And then this is tree number 14. We did deny the removal of this tree. We found it to have fair structure and did not find it to have severe decay or any kind of cavities that we would consider very high risk for the tree to fail. We believe that that risk can be mitigated with pruning. This tree, however, you will see that it is very close to that structure. And because we denied the removal of this tree, the applicant appealed our decision. This is site number 15. We denied this site. We believe the tree's in fair condition. It doesn't have similar pockets of decay or cavities compared to some of the other trees. And we believe any dieback can be reduced or basically cleaned out. We can prune the tree to mitigate any risk of some of those branches filling. And we believe this tree could be sustained for additional years, but should be monitored by the private property. And just another photo of that tree growing kind of in that small strip of ground adjacent to the parking lot structure. Finally, this is the street tree we approved for removal. It's located at 1355 Laguna Street. It's part of the same removal permit, same parcel of property. You'll see here that it has a lot of dieback in the crown, and also you'll see kind of the bark starting to slough off, which is a good indicator of poor condition. This site will be replaced. These are some photos, closer photos of the tree. The dieback in the crown is approaching more than 30%. And then the trunk of the tree there, you'll see kind of a very large canker, or which is kind of an area of basically diseased or damaged cambium or tissue. So that tree really actually starts to struggle to bring up nutrients and water to basically support itself through photosynthesis. So this tree, because it was in poor condition, we approved it for removal. I have no further comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Stacy. So the applicant has appealed some of the recommendations. Would the applicant like to speak? Is the person that appealed the staff recommendation present? Ms. Stacy, have you yet received any communication from them? Any written communication or? Oh, I see a hand up now. Okay, I just see it as a Zoom.
Hi, my name is Nancy. I live in this co-op complex. And so some of the people that may want to speak, they're probably used to seeing on the top portion instead of raising their hand. They usually see the unmute button. So that might be something. I see it now, but it wasn't there earlier.
Okay, so this is going to be for people that are so do we know who appealed the staff recommendation?
They may be having trouble because they didn't raise their hand. They don't see an unmute button on their monitor.
Okay, well, let me ask either Cerise or Miss Stacy, do we know who appealed?
I don't have that information here with me. No, I
Okay.
don't.
Miss Stacy, do you know who appealed?
I don't have that information readily in front of me. As you
Okay.
start to take comments, I can try to look for it.
Okay, ma'am,
And let me interject and say, yes, you will. Anyone listening who is who needs to speak, please raise your hand. You will not see the mute button until I ask you to unmute, and then it will show up. So yes, go ahead and raise your hand and we will call you in turn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cerise. So let's start with the lady that was just speaking, who's got the Zoom.
Okay, hi, my name is Nancy Nagano and I live in St. Francis Square Co-op,
Okay, Ms. Nagano, can you spell your last name for me, please?
Nagano.
Great, thank you very much. And
Hello,
you're speaking to appeal the staff recommendation, is that correct?
Well, partially, and I would like to also add information that was not added is during the winter, the tree branch fell into the parking lot and damaged cars. I don't know if there were any people that were injured. So that would be an additional reason to have a concern with the tree removal.
Okay,
you. Uh-huh.
so Miss Stacy spoke about several trees that the staff has recommended to keep. Did you want to appeal them all, or are you appealing just specific recommendations about specific trees?
I personally looked at them myself and I could recognize some of the poorer trees, but I don't remember which they were in order, just because I walk around and inspect the grounds almost on a daily basis. So I don't really know. Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. So the next speaker, it's Kathy Phillips. Go ahead, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. So my name is Connie Ford and Kathy Billups is here and we're on the board of St. Francis Square. And we have observed all of the trees quite well. I mean, we actually are two people who love the trees and found it hard to agree with chopping them down, but we agree with the report and we agree with what's going to happen by cutting some of them down, but not all of them. And Nancy is right that the trees during the last storm fell into a parking lot and fortunately nobody was hurt, but some cars were, and it could have hurt people if they had been there. The other thing I just want to mention is right across the street on the other side of the parking lot is a child care center, and they have lots of children. And if a storm came up in the middle of the morning or in the afternoon, there's a lot of kids and a lot of parents and they would be hurt. And further down from that, which is closer to some of these trees, there's a senior in-home nursing home. So there's a lot of vulnerable people here. And the last thing that I want to say in terms of supporting what the city and the other folks have put forward is that we had recently one of our big trees, not these trees, but another tree that we were looking at. And in that last storm, again, it fell down into a public elementary school. Fortunately, the kids were all in class right then when the winds came up, but that whole tree fell down and it literally took up all of one play yard. So we're very sensitive about our trees. We want to keep them healthy, but we do not need to have old and dying trees that make it vulnerable for our residents, for the senior center, and for the preschool.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. So I just want to clarify, the department made recommendations to keep some trees,
right,
and to remove some trees. So are you okay with those recommendations?
Yes, we strongly agree with that position.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Are there any other speakers that appealed the city's recommendations? All right. Oh, Miss Bowler. Go ahead, Miss Bowler.
Yes, I didn't appeal.
Okay, Well, we're gonna go to people that are protesting any of the removals, but
Well,
if you'd like to
I-
start with that, you could be that person.
I protest the removal. I just I didn't know that it was, that I needed to file an appeal.
No, the appeal was over some of the ones to keep, I believe. So this is on the, so you would like to speak about the removal, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay. Uh, the first thing to say is that the street tree is called 1345 Ellis on your notices. So I looked up and down Ellis Street, both sides, and I found no address of 1345 Ellis Street. So no one would be notified that it was a tree around the corner there. And I live on the corner, I live catty corner from St. Francis Square. There are notices missing from 3 of the poplars. Also, I'm interested to know when these trees were planted, how old they are. Were they planted before the construction of the underground garage and the parking lot or not? And I just have to, I recognize that there might be danger in some of them, but I question the need to remove all of those suggested for removal. I see those holes of decay. I thought they were something that some bird pecked in them or something. So I know I don't know about tree physiology and damage. But poplar trees have very strong roots. I guess because they grow so tall. And I don't know what the danger of the tree falling is. There may be, if they were correctly pruned, there should be no significant danger of their losing branches and falling on anybody. And also, I would be interested to know if it would be useful to get an opinion from a second arborist who has more experience with judging the health.
30 seconds.
And that is about it.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Bowler. Are there other speakers that wish to protest the removal? Mr. John Nolte, I see your hand up.
Yes, good evening. I walked over there and I took pictures of all the trees, and I see that, again, trees that, she has here number 1, 2, they had postings on them. So therefore, the public, whoever put up actually there was wrappings around all the trees. And here you're saying that 5 are being denied, and then the others are being approved on the Ellis side or Laguna side. So anyway, it also has the wrong address. It has from across the street. So when you use the word adjacent, it means adjacent means next to. So the parking lot has a totally different address, and the right address was shown by the buff person. So again, the wrong address on the postings on this agenda. Also, the parking lot. Obviously, the co-op forgot to put a top on the parking lot. So if you had put something on the top, maybe then you won't be worried about trees falling into your parking lot and hurting your cars. So, you know, and again, also it goes back to another question that was already raised about how long has these trees been there, and when with the parking lot, are they, you know, again, it's a forest. You're literally trying to trim a forest, and you look also at the rest of the co-op, you have trees all over the place. So therefore, you had originally put some type of, you know, greening plan together when you decided to put together your co-op area there, which is multiple blocks. And so this line of trees is a windbreaker for the parking lot. And what are you going to do when you don't have that windbreaker there? So there are a lot of issues with the removal of so many trees in this area. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Clip, you're up next.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a note about replacement trees. I don't believe that the city's design guidelines for tree planting and spacing apply to trees on private property. And certainly we need to be doing better than a partial replacement, given all of the facts that we know about our San Francisco's shrinking urban canopy. In the general comment at the beginning of this meeting, I talked about the community-driven tree removal moratorium. And I mentioned that, you know, when I drafted that, I specifically wrote in an exception in the case of hazard trees. You know, a moratorium on removal, except if it is a hazard tree. Obviously, we don't want to be keeping trees standing that are a hazard to humans. Hazard trees have a separate categorization under Article 16. They have it's a different type of assessment, it's a whole different process. It's a 15-day process, not a 30-day process. And these trees were not brought to this hearing under the categorization of hazard. So at least in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of the city itself, these trees are not designated as hazard trees. I did hear commenter talk about the tree branch that fell during the storms. And I would just note that those storms were incredible. Our city sustained cyclonic speed winds. And we should all be able to remember how terrifying that was, how we saw trees laying across roads. It was like a tree Armageddon. And these trees did not fall. They have issues, but they survived. And we cannot continue to just every time a tree loses a branch, cut it down. Or if we're afraid, cut it down. When I drafted the moratorium, you know, I thought I might get a little support for it. But I honestly was overwhelmed by the support that I received. And the reason is that anyone who has eyes can see how many trees we lost during those storms. And anyone who is paying attention can see how badly this city is failing to preserve and grow our urban canopy. And anyone who's tried to do any sort of community organizing in this city understands how hard it is to get people to agree on anything. You heard the list that I gave you at the beginning of this meeting. Not a single organization that I presented that moratorium to refused to sign it. All of them signed it, most of them within days.
30 seconds.
The city is in no position to be cutting down trees that it itself doesn't consider a hazard, and that made it through all those storms. With my last 20 seconds, I just want to thank Sarah Stacy, and I want to thank Cerise. I know that your department has been wildly understaffed. I know that those storms made your jobs harder, and I just want to thank you for your service in this uphill battle for our city's urban canopy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clip, and thank you for saying that. I echo those comments regarding Stacy and Ms. Witter. Mr. Nolte, Michael Nolte, you're up.
Hi, Michael Nolte, N-U-L-T-Y. It's amazing how it's so easy to find a reason to knock down a tree and then justify it with rules and regulations and what if and what how and what if this happened and what if that happened, and you know, finding excuses. There's this what if thing. It's amazing how our mind could just go on and on and on about what ifs. You somebody some time ago must have decided it was like a Johnny Appleseed, walk 3 paces and plant a seed, and then walk another couple paces and then plant another seed to put those damn trees in, evenly spaced. And then somebody must have decided, well, we're going to put a bunch of structures in. And that's what caused some of the damage to the trees. It's clear to me that the trees were probably there first. They look pretty, some of them have nice round, big bases to them. And they're very, in a row, and they've obviously been able to maintain themselves for some time. But then there's the problem of, hearing that it's a co-op, hiring somebody to prune the trees, and then finding out that whoever pruned them, ended up with creating some of the damage. So then my question is, okay, well, let's say for hypothetically, we decide to remove some of the trees. Well, if you're going to hire the same people that damage the trees through pruning to do the same thing to the remaining trees, then we're basically going back to square one again and saying, well, we need to remove the trees again because we've created more damage to the existing trees that we hypothetically still want to keep. So let's get back to the reality. These are living things and we need to respect them. And what I'm not hearing is how to respect them and keep them alive, and keep them functional. So if anything, there's no hazard trees on this site, so none should be removed. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. Any other speakers? So, Ms. Nagano, I see your hand up again. Are you speaking or is the other person with you going to speak?
I would like to speak. I spoke before. My name is Connie. If Nancy wants to speak first or second, she can speak before me. I just have some.
Okay. So Nancy spoke before or you spoke before?
We both spoke before.
Okay. Well, you only get kind of one bite at the apple here.
Oh, okay. So then Kathy, you
So
want to speak?
if you've both had an opportunity, otherwise we'll go on forever. So I apologize for that.
So can you tell me, okay,
Wait, this is Kathy.
This is Kathy Billups and I'm the president of the board. So can you tell us, are there trees that the lady was talking about? Are they going to get cut down?
So what happens is I take notes and I send these to the acting director, and the acting director considers the staff report, considers public comment, which is what we're doing here. And then I provide a recommendation, and it's up to the acting director to actually make a decision. And so she'll review all the information and then is free to accept, reject, modify, or whatever my recommendations are.
In the parking lot was first.
Okay, so we really our recommendation is, because we had an arborist come out and we recommend that what the lady said, some of the trees that should be cut down should be cut, but not all of them. Because we walked around too to see
So
them.
if you have that arborist report, and if you've not already submitted it to staff, I'll ask that you submit it to staff tomorrow, if possible. And I will take that and review it and add that to the file, and that'll also be available to the acting director.
Mr. Goldberg, I placed our urban forestry inbox address in the chat. So anyone who would like to send further comments, send it to urbanforestry@sfdpw.org.
Okay, does everyone have that? See that in the chat? The address. So if you get that in, hopefully tomorrow, I would like to start working on the write-up on Wednesday so that the acting director has an opportunity to review it and can, make some decisions and people can move forward with the recommendations. Okay.
This is Sarah Stacy with Urban Forestry. I can confirm we did receive that report. I'll make sure you have it.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So with that, I have nothing further. So I want to appreciate everyone's time for being part of this, and it makes a big difference. And it certainly helps the acting director make her decisions. So thank you all, and special thanks to Miss Stacy for all of her work, and for Suri Swaders, who's the brains behind this and making sure it all comes together. So thank you all and have a good evening.